Hey guys, tonight we slip back into a world that smells faintly of manure, fish guts, and something vaguely rotting you can't quite place. You're waking up in a medieval village. There's no alarm clock, no coffee brewing, just the rising sun squeezing through the cracks of a wooden wall and the unmistakable sound of a rooster who hates you personally. You're not in a warm bed. You're sprawled on a straw mattress stuffed with bugs and regret, nestled against a wooden board that's harder than your landlord's heart. Fleas and lice are already having a breakfast buffet on your legs. There's a rat in the corner doing something shady. Your back feels like someone beat it with a cart axle in your sleep. Good morning. You try to stretch, but your shoulders groan like a rusted hinge. That's because yesterday, and the day before, and the day before that, you spent hauling buckets, chopping wood, or bending over in a field like a human comma. You're 14 years old and already moving like you're 70. Medieval ergonomics, not a thing. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your location and what time you're watching. Curious how many time zones we're falling asleep in tonight. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your feet hit the dirt floor with a thud. Cold. Always cold. There's no insulation in this timber-framed shack, and the rushies covering the floor are soaked with spilled stew, animal droppings, and things we shall not name. You pull on your one pair of woolen hose, crusty from yesterday's sweat. You don't have socks or shoes, really, just stiff leather bindings with ambition. Outside, the village is barely stirring. A couple of pigs grunt under a cart. Smoke curls lazily from a chimney 2 huts down. And that clanging? That's the blacksmith, who doesn't believe in sleeping past dawn. Neither does the church bell, which just started ringing like it's trying to summon the dead. You duck under the low door frame, hitting your head for the 37th time this month. There's no such thing as standard measurements in medieval architecture. Every hut is designed to concuss you uniquely. A drizzle has begun. Because of course it has. The mud instantly sucks at your feet. You trudge past neighbors who look just as miserable as you. Agnes, the woman down the lane, already has 6 kids clinging to her skirts and is pregnant with the 7th. She's 23. Breakfast? Forget it for now. First, you're expected to feed the chickens and fetch water. 2 tasks guaranteed to ruin your morning. The chickens, by the way, are mean and smart. You swear one of them is planning something. Let's take a second to appreciate how different your morning routine is. There's no scrolling Instagram while sipping a latte. No Spotify playlist. No hot shower. Just the smell of wet hay, damp wool, and the persistent fear that someone, will make your life harder today. Historians still argue whether early risers in medieval towns were mostly laborious, clergy, or livestock handlers. But what they agree on is, nobody got to sleep in. By the time you finish wrangling the chickens and dodging a gander with a vendetta, your fingers are numb and your stomach is rumbling. Breakfast is a sad little event, coming up in the next section. But even before that, there's the joy of medieval hygiene to contend with. Spoiler alert, there's none. The communal wash basin is ice cold and filled with water that's been used by at least 3 other people this morning. You splash your face, barely removing the grime, and instantly regret it as the wind hits your wet cheeks. The water reeks faintly of cabbage. You suspect someone rinsed their laundry, or themselves, in it last night. And yes, probably both. One fun historical fact. Some medieval folks used wool soaked in vinegar as underarm deodorant. Did it work? Not even close. But it's the thought that counts. A fringe theory claims that in some villages, especially during festivals, people would rub herbs or even garlic into their armpits to ward off spirits. Imagine being stuck in a packed church service, surrounded by 60 garlic-scented villagers, praying away demons and body odor. You pass a public notice nailed to a post. Someone's been accused of stealing grain again. Punishment. Stocks in the town square or worse, depending on who they annoyed. Everyday justice was a casual affair. By now, your joints are stiff again. Your nose is running, and you still haven't eaten. But congratulations, you've survived the first half hour of your medieval morning. It only gets worse from here. Still, as grim as it sounds. There's something cozy in the quiet misery. The cluck of hens, the hiss of firewood, the low hum of people trying to live 1 hour at a time. That rhythm, slow, relentless, and muddy, becomes your heartbeat. But don't get too comfortable. The outhouse is calling, and it's a journey unto itself. Toilet time. And no, you're not walking into a clean, tiled restroom with 3-ply toilet paper and a pleasant eucalyptus candle. You're heading to the privy, which is a generous term for a pit in the ground surrounded by wood, splinters, and shame. It's about 30 feet behind your house, down a slippery path that's trying to kill you. There's no light, just the faint gray of morning and the glow of your own dread. You hold your breath and push open the creaky wooden door, hoping no one else is inside. Always, hoping no rat, snake, or spider is. There's no seat, just a hole, a very suspicious hole. You perch over it like a bird on a branch, praying you don't fall in. The stench, it hits like a club to the nose. Ammonia, decay, and an earthy must that says, many people before you have suffered hay. And you wipe? Maybe, if you brought straw, moss, or an old scrap of linen. But linen is expensive, so you use what you have. If you're truly lucky, you've saved a square of last month's ruined tunic. If not, well, there's always leaves. Hopefully not nettles this time. Mainstream historical records confirm that medieval privies were rarely cleaned. Waste just collected until the pit filled, and then someone, not you, hopefully, had to dig a new one. These latrine pits were breeding grounds for disease, with no concept of sanitation beyond don't fall in. Some towns had shared privies over flowing rivers, where everything just floated away. Out of sight, out of smell, they hoped. Unfortunately, sometimes that waste floated back into the water supply. Which brings us to next section's delightful topic. But wait, back to your current predicament. You're standing now, wiping your hands on your tunic. Hand washing is optional and water is freezing. There's no sink, no soap. A small breeze finds its way through the wooden slats and hits your freshly exposed skin. You shiver. You shuffle back toward the house. Someone's already waiting their turn for the toilet, clutching a bundled cloth and avoiding eye contact like you're both survivors of something unspeakable. Which you are. Fun fringe fact. In wealthier castles, nobles sometimes used gong farmers to clean out their waste pits. These were professional waste removers who worked only at night and were paid surprisingly well, for a job that literally meant shoveling human excrement in the dark. Historians still argue whether they were despised or respected for their essential, revolting work. Let's talk about privacy for a moment. Spoiler, there isn't any. Whether you're relieving yourself, changing clothes, or just trying to be alone, you're usually doing it in front of family members, neighbors, or livestock. The idea of me time would have been laughable. You get we time all the time. And heaven help you if you're on a long trip. Public toilets on the road, not a thing. You'll be squatting behind a bush, behind a barn, or, if you're urban, over a communal cesspit. Yes, those existed. And no, they weren't empty. But maybe, just maybe, you're a peasant working on a manor estate with access to a special treat, the moat latrine. That's right, a small wooden toilet built right over the moat. Convenient, except, well, moats weren't clean swimming pools. They were stagnant, reeking cesswaters full of disease and dead fish. So your waste just joins the family. Still, all things considered, it's probably safer than the pit you've got at home. If you're lucky, no one's fallen in recently. You walk back toward the fire, trying to shake off the chill and the psychological damage. Someone in your family is starting breakfast, but you'll smell that long before you see it. Spoiler, it doesn't involve pancakes. One last indignity before we move on. If you're sick, say dysentery sick, you'll be making this terrifying trek multiple times a day. Weak, sweating, and in the rain. No warm blankets, no Pedialyte, no helpful nurse. Just you and the privy. Over and over. You might even be forced to share a chamber pot during the night. These delightful ceramic or metal buckets sat under your bed and held your nighttime business. Come morning, they got dumped out a window or hurled into the street. Gardaloo was the warning cry in French-speaking regions. Watch out. If you heard that, you ran or ducked. Preferably both. Oh, and chamber pots. They weren't just for peasants. Even nobles used them. Queen Elizabeth I reportedly had haze lined with velvet, which raises many questions, none of which have comforting answers. You survived the morning's trip, but your day is already stained, emotionally and possibly literally. And guess what? It's only breakfast time. Time to find out what's bubbling in the pot by the hearth. You step into the one-room hut, and whatever hope you had of warming up is immediately dashed. The hearth, the so-called kitchen, is little more than a smoke-stained nook in the wall. It's been burning since dawn, or smoldering at least. The good firewood ran out 3 days ago, and now you're burning damp twigs and go dung. Breakfast is going to taste like regret and chimney soot. The pot hanging above the flames contains something. It's not moving much, which is both reassuring and unsettling. You peek inside. Thick grayish porridge stares back at you, made from barley or oats, water, and possibly a sprinkle of yesterday. If there's honey, you're celebrating. If there's milk, you have a cow or a wealthy neighbor. If there's meat, it's probably a Tuesday hallucination. Welcome to your daily pottage, a kind of medieval all-in-one dish that could stretch leftovers across a week. Bland, soupy, and mostly edible. If it's too runny, someone added more water. If it's too thick, it burned and was scraped back into the pot anyway. You sit on a bench, which wobbles, and take a wooden spoonful. It's warm. That's the nicest thing you can say. A hint of onion? Possibly. More likely it's just smoke-flavored. You chew slowly, aware that breakfast is both the best and worst meal of the day, because at least it's something. And you're not dead. Yet. Mainstream history agrees. Most peasants had a diet heavy on grains and pulses, light on meat, and utterly dependent on what they could grow or barter. Breakfast wasn't distinct from other meals. It was more like first food before the long slog of labor began. Sometimes you had ale with it. Yes, beer for breakfast. Don't get excited. It's weak, small ale with low alcohol, safer than water, and tasting faintly of old bread. It's served lukewarm in a wooden mug with something floating in it. You don't ask what. You just sip. There's no table setting, no napkins, no Instagram-worthy arrangement of fruit. Just one bowl, maybe two if your family is fancy, and everyone takes turns or eats directly with their hands. Double dipping isn't even a concept. It's survival. Some mornings, you get hard bread. And by hard, we mean brick level. You soak in the pottage to soften it, but you still feel your teeth negotiating with it like, is this worth it? And yes, dental agony is coming soon. Hold tight. Fun fringe tidbit. In some homes, bread was reused, yes, reused, as a plate. Called trencher bread, it would soak up meat, juices, and sauce, then be eaten at the end. Or if you were pious or full, it was given to beggars or dogs. Historians still argue whether this was an act of charity or just medieval composting. Your neighbor wanders in uninvited again. He's brought half a dried onion and wants to trade. You sigh. You have no onion needs, but turning him away risks social awkwardness, which in medieval times was a bigger deal than dysentery. You offer a spoonful of your sad breakfast in return. It's accepted like a royal favor. Social rules are odd here. Everyone shares because everyone has to. But there's also this grim, quiet competition. Who has more eggs this week? Who still has salt? Who hasn't eaten turnips 3 meals a day for the past month? Someone burps. Loudly. No one reacts. Manners? Optional. You finish eating, your stomach only half satisfied but your body warmed slightly. You scrape the pot clean with a hunk of stale crust and put it back on the hook for later, because if you don't, it'll be stuck there until next Tuesday. Your mind drifts for a moment. You picture a toaster, a bagel, butter, maybe a cup of coffee with just enough cream. Then you remember, cows are for milking, not creaming lattes. And toasters haven't been invented yet. You're trapped in a world where breakfast is a gritty endurance test, not a cozy ritual. One scholarly debate still lingers around the concept of fasting days, with historians questioning how strictly peasants followed them. Officially, you're not supposed to eat meat on Wednesdays, Fridays, or during Lent. But if the only meat you ever see is a stray squirrel, does it count? Speaking of meat, if you ever get your hands on bacon, it's a big deal. So big, in fact, that in some towns, a married couple who hadn't argued in a year could win a flitch of bacon as a prize. Sounds nice, until you realize no one ever actually won it. Too many arguments about who left the hearth smoking or why the ale tastes like socks. You rinse your bowl with a splash of dirty water and rub it clean with a rag that's seen better decades. Someone ties up the hen that keeps escaping through the wall. And just like that, breakfast is over. Now, it's time to dress for the day's work, which means diving into the joys of medieval fashion. If by fashion, you mean sackcloth that itches like betrayal. You shuffle to the corner of your hut where your clothes are stored, or more accurately, where they hang from a nail in the wall like forgotten laundry. You don't have options. You have a set of clothes. Possibly two, if your family's doing okay this year. But changing? That's more of a monthly tradition than a daily habit. You pull on your tunic, wool, itchy, and roughly the consistency of a steel wool pad. It was once a nice brown. Now it's a kind of streaked, grayish green, like a compost heap in late autumn. It smells like old sweat in the river. And that's just the top layer. The under tunic is thinner, soaked through with life and labor. You're already sweating, and the sun isn't even fully up. Your hose, those are your leg coverings, go on next. They sag. They always sag. They're secured with laces or a belt, and they itch in places you didn't know could itch. You wonder briefly if the lice will ever grow tired of your blood. They won't. Most peasants wear wool because linen is expensive and reserved for wealthier folks. Wool keeps you warm, but also traps every ounce of your body odor, like it's collecting it for posterity. Washing clothes is rare. Washing well is nearly unheard of. You need a whole day, soap made of animal fat and ash, and a stream that's not full of, well, last night's waste. Mainstream history tells us that most lower-class medieval folks owned perhaps two full sets of clothing. One for work, one for Sunday best, though your Sunday outfit is just the cleaner version of your everyday tunic. Cleanliness, as a moral virtue, came into fashion later. Right now, dirt is your accessory. You tie your belt, not because it's stylish, but because it's functional. Your knife hangs from it. Your pouch with that one precious coin, maybe a lucky dried bean, or a smooth stone you tell yourself is magical. It's not, but hope is free. You wrap your head in a coif or a cloth cap. Keeps your ears warm and the lice evenly distributed. You think about brushing your hair, but your comb broke 2 months ago. And hair oil? Please. Your scalp does a fine job on its own. Now for shoes. If you have them, they're simple leather wraps, more glorified sacks than shoes, held on by laces or tied bits of twine. The soles are thin, the edges fraying, and one side is soaked from last week's puddle encounter. You can feel every rock and thorn as you walk, but hey, blisters build character. Here's a delightful tidbit. Some folks in colder climates stuff their shoes with straw in winter. Not for comfort, just to avoid frostbite. Historians still argue whether peasant footwear evolved from Roman sandals or native styles. But either way, medieval shoe design was basically cover the foot and pray. And don't even dream about underwear. That's a luxury item. Nobles had brays, linen shorts tied at the waist. You have a tunic. And some hopes. You shift uncomfortably. The wool scratches in ways you wish it wouldn't. You glance over at the women in your family. They're wrapping themselves in layered linen smocks under slightly cleaner wool overdresses. They had aprons, headscarves, and sleeves tied at the wrist. There's a ritual to it, a dignity, even if they're just dressing for the pigs. But you also notice how often they scratch at the same places as you. Solidarity in suffering. Now here comes the fun part. Everything you're wearing is crawling. Lice are inevitable. Fleas come free with every night's sleep. And if you get scabies, well, you get scabies. There's no ointment, just sulfur, if you're lucky, and the slow realization that medieval fashion isn't glamorous. It's a parasitic party. You tug your sleeves down, grit your teeth, and prepare for the long day ahead. The clothing pinches, pulls, and hangs strangely because it was never tailored to fit. Just stitched by hand from whatever patternless chunk of cloth your family could afford last year. And heaven help you if it tears. Needlework is slow, and thread costs too much. Fringe fact for the curious. Some villagers passed down clothes like heirlooms. Tunics patched so many times they were more repair than original. A peasant's wardrobe was a living document of their family's poverty. The more patched, the more stories it held. You check your reflection in the puddle outside. Not great. Your face is already smeared with soot, your clothes are wrinkled, and your left sleeve smells faintly of fermented turnip. But there's no time to worry. The sun's up now. The landlord's steward is coming, and you got a full day of labor ahead. You step outside, clothes clinging to you in the damp. A neighbor waves. His shirt is missing an entire sleeve, but he doesn't seem to mind. You nod. Everyone's itchy. Everyone's resigned. You march on, adjusting your belt for the 100th time. Because in the Middle Ages, comfort isn't a right. It's a rumor. And while you scratch your way toward the fields, a throbbing starts in your jaw. Right on cue. At first, it's a dull throb. Almost ignorable if you're busy enough. But as you trudge toward the fields, the pain in your jaw deepens, like a heartbeat inside your face. It's your molar, the same one that's been threatening mutiny all week. You prod it with your tongue. Bad idea. Lightning shoots through your skull. Congratulations, you've got a toothache in medieval Europe, and you're in for a world of suffering. There's no dentist to call, no numbing gel, no appointment slot to click online. Your options are 1. Live with the pain until it becomes unbearable, or 2. Beg the village tooth puller to yank it out with tongs that haven't been cleaned since the last 5 victims screamed into them. Spoiler, they don't use gloves. Or sympathy, you spit in the grass. A streak of pink. Great, it's infected. Mainstream historians agree that dental hygiene wasn't exactly a priority in a medieval world. People used frayed twigs as toothbrushes, chewed on mint or sage leaves for fresh breath, and rinsed with wine or vinegar when things got especially grim. But sugar was rare until it wasn't. Once sugar started arriving from the Middle East in the later medieval period, tooth decay skyrocketed, especially among the upper classes who could afford sweets. Ironically, your peasant life spares you from those expensive treats, but not from the horror of cracked, rotting, or impacted teeth. That's just bad luck and worse genetics. You remember what happened to Tom, the miller's boy. He had an abscess. His cheek swelled until it looked like he was smuggling a turnip in it. Then one morning, he just didn't wake up. Infection got into the bloodstream. Sepsis. No one said the word, but they buried him quick. You suck in cold air through clenched teeth, try not to wince. A woman passing by notices and nods. Tooth, she says sympathetically. Clove helps. She hands you a shriveled pod from a pouch tied to her belt. You chew it. It tastes sharp, woody bitter. Doesn't help much, but it's something. Here's a delightful little fringe tidbit. Some medieval dentists believed worms caused toothaches. Literal worms, hiding in your gums. So they burn herbs near your mouth, hoping to smoke the worm out. Historians still argue whether this idea came from Norse texts or folk traditions further east, but either way, it's not scientifically sound, just smoky and terrifying. And if the clove fails, you got 2 choices. One is Father Bertram, the local priest who'll offer to pray the pain away while suggesting its punishment for lustful thoughts. The other is the blacksmith, who does extractions on the side. He keeps a set of rusty iron pincers for such moments. Payment: 1 egg or a silver penny. Scream optional, but expected. You saw him work once. He braced a man's head against a stump, shoved the tongs in, and cranked until the root popped free like a cork. Blood everywhere. The man fainted. The blacksmith shrugged and wiped the tools on his apron. Needless to say, you're in no rush to visit him. But let's say the pain really gets to you. You give in. You sit on the stool, open wide, and brace yourself. There's no anesthesia. Just a couple of friends holding you down while the metal digs in. The pain? Blinding. The crack? Loud. The aftermath? Bleeding, swelling, and a very real risk of death by infection. People did die from extractions, or ended up with shattered jaws, infected sockets, and gaping holes that never healed properly. And don't even think about replacement teeth. You'll be gumming your pottage from now on. There's another folk cure you might try first. Mouth rinses made of wine, vinegar, sage, and salt. Maybe even a poultice of boiled herbs tied to your cheek. None of them work particularly well, but they make you feel like you're doing something, and in medieval times, that count for a lot. Meanwhile, your breath? It could drop a night. Halitosis wasn't just common, it was standard. No mints, no floss, no TikTok dental hacks. Just festering gums and a world that doesn't know better. You glance at the village healer's hut. She's got dried plants hanging from every rafter and a jar of suspicious-looking salve labeled tooth charm. You tried it once. It numbed your lip and made your ear ring for a week. You're not sure if it was working or cursing you. You grit your teeth carefully and keep walking. The ache pulses with every step like it has its own drumbeat. But you're expected in the fields, or the kitchen, or the workshop. Doesn't matter. Pain doesn't get you out of work. It just comes along for the ride. And while you're dragging your feet and imagining life with no molars, a rooster somewhere crows again. Late. You want to blame him for all of this. There's no sick day, no dental insurance, just grit, literally and figuratively. And if the pain gets too bad, well, there's always a strong ale and a friend with a heavy rock. It's not ideal, but it's medieval. You reach the fields just as the sky turns from gray to a murky blue. Mist clings to the ground like it's trying to stay warm, and everything smells like damp earth, old hay, and that familiar undertone of livestock funk. It's time for work, backbreaking work. Not metaphorically. Your spine will complain before the first hour's out. Your task today? Digging. Yesterday, it was weeding. Tomorrow? Hauling rocks or cleaning the pig pens. It doesn't matter. Whatever the lord of the manor needs done, you do. Whether your tooth hurts, or your stomach growls, or your knee clicks ominously when you squat, it doesn't matter. No work, no food. You grab the wooden-handled hoe. It's heavy. The blade's chipped. The grip is worn smooth by 1,000 hands before yours. You're about to join the long, eternal rhythm of peasant labor. Thwack, pull, thwack, pull, over and over and over. A lot of people today fantasize about going off-grid or returning to the land. That's adorable. You're not homesteading on a curated Instagram farm. You're being worked to the bone in a system designed to wring sweat out of your body like you're a walking sponge. Mainstream historians estimate that medieval peasants worked from sunup to sundown, 6 days a week, roughly 2,000 to 3,000 labor hours a year, often more during planting or harvest seasons. Rest days were usually church days, and even then, you might end up mending tools or fetching water. And that's just the physical toll. You're always dirty, always sore, always nursing a bruise, a splinter, or a twisted ankle that no one has time to care about. Your back aches constantly because posture isn't a thing when you're hunched over a field for 12 hours straight. You're basically a lowercase R by age 30. You wipe your brow, already sweating, even in the cool air. There's no water break. If you brought a flask, it's probably filled with that weak ale again. Not because you're trying to party, but because it won't kill you like the river water might. You sip and spit. Warm, bitter, dusty, still safer than the alternative. Next to you, an old man grunts. His hands are twisted with arthritis, his face lined like a plowed field. He's at least 50, which basically makes him Gandalf. You ask how long he's been doing this. He shrugs. Since I could walk. You nod. Sounds right. A small boy trots by with a bucket of manure. He's 5, maybe 6. Already working. Child labor isn't frowned upon. It's expected. You're not coddled. You're conditioned. Quirky tidbit time. In some medieval villages, children were given miniature tools, tiny rakes, little hoes, to get them used to labor early. Ah, adorable and tragic. The soil is rocky. Every few feet, your hoe hits something solid. A root, a stone, a skull once, don't ask. You pry it loose, toss it aside, and keep going. Because time doesn't stop, and neither do expectations. Then there's the overseer, a steward sent by the local lord to make sure the fields are worked efficiently. He rides by on a horse, looking dramatically less miserable than the rest of you. Occasionally, he shouts something about slowness. Occasionally, he just watches. His horse snorts like it's judging you personally. The steward's presence reminds you of your place in the system. You're not working your own land. You're working his. And in return, you get a scrap of your own field, some rights to pasture a few pigs, and permission to exist in a hut that leaks on 3 sides. Historians still argue whether this feudal arrangement was more exploitative or symbiotic. Some claim peasants had it pretty okay for the time. Others point out the endless hunger, legal limitations, and the charming reality that your lord could, at any point, conscript you into his army or marry off your daughter. Speaking of daughters, one runs by now, barefoot, hauling a basket twice her size, chasing after a goose that's screaming like it owes money. No one laughs. No one helps. You're all too busy trying not to fall behind. You switch hands. Your palm is blistered. You should have worn gloves, except you don't have gloves. You wipe the blood on your tunic. Doesn't matter. It'll blend in with the mud and pig fat already embedded in the weave. Every now and then, a crow caws overhead. You glance up. It's your only moment of escape. That bird can fly wherever it wants. You got another 8 hours of this, and then animal chores, and maybe a few moments by the fire before collapsing into that itchy pile of straw you dare to call bed. But there's rhythm in the work, a hypnotic pace. Your arms move on their own now. Your back has stopped complaining. It's just humming with dull pain. Your mind drifts. You think of winter. You think of storms. You think of death and how quiet it might be. Then someone cries out. A boy nearby has sliced his hand on a blade. No gloves. No bandages. Just mud and pressure and hope. You keep working, because the field doesn't care. The work doesn't stop, and neither can you. You reach the fields just as the sky turns from gray to a murky blue. Mist clings to the ground like it's trying to stay warm, and everything smells like damp earth, old hay, and that familiar undertone of livestock funk. It's time for work, backbreaking work, not metaphorically. Your spine will complain before the first hour's out. Your task today? Digging. Yesterday, it was weeding. Tomorrow? Hauling rocks or cleaning the pig pens. It doesn't matter. Whatever the lord of the manor needs done, you do. Whether your tooth hurts, or your stomach growls, or your knee clicks ominously when you squat, it doesn't matter. No work, no food. You grab the wooden-handled hoe. It's heavy. The blade's chipped. The grip is worn smooth by 1,000 hands before yours. You're about to join the long, eternal rhythm of peasant labor. Thwack, pull, thwack, pull, over and over and over. A lot of people today fantasize about going off-grid or returning to the land. That's adorable. You're not homesteading on a curated Instagram farm. You're being worked to the bone in a system designed to wring sweat out of your body like you're a walking sponge. Mainstream historians estimate that medieval peasants worked from sunup to sundown, 6 days a week, roughly 2,000 to 3,000 labor hours a year, often more during planting or harvest seasons. Rest days were usually church days, and even then, you might end up mending tools or fetching water. And that's just the physical toll. You're always dirty, always sore, always nursing a bruise, a splinter, or a twisted ankle that no one has time to care about. Your back aches constantly because posture isn't a thing when you're hunched over a field for 12 hours straight. You're basically a lowercase R by age 30. You wipe your brow, already sweating, even in the cool air. There's no water break. If you brought a flask, it's probably filled with that weak ale again. Not because you're trying to party, but because it won't kill you like the river water might. You sip and spit. Warm, bitter, dusty, still safer than the alternative. Next to you, an old man grunts. His hands are twisted with arthritis, his face lined like a plowed field. He's at least 50, which basically makes him Gandalf. You ask how long he's been doing this. He shrugs. Since I could walk. You nod. Sounds right. A small boy trots by with a bucket of manure. He's 5, maybe 6. Already working. Child labor isn't frowned upon. It's expected. You're not coddled. You're conditioned. Quirky tidbit time. In some medieval villages, children were given miniature tools, tiny rakes, little hoes, to get them used to labor early. Adorable. And tragic. The soil is rocky. Every few feet, your hoe hits something solid. A root, a stone, a skull once, don't ask. You pry it loose, toss it aside, and keep going. Because time doesn't stop, and neither do expectations. Then there's the overseer, a steward sent by the local lord to make sure the fields are worked efficiently. He rides by on a horse, looking dramatically less miserable than the rest of you. Occasionally, he shouts something about slowness. Occasionally, he just watches. His horse snorts like it's judging you personally. The steward's presence reminds you of your place in the system. You're not working your own land. You're working his. And in return, you get a scrap of your own field, some rights to pasture a few pigs, and permission to exist in a hut that leaks on 3 sides. Historians still argue whether this feudal arrangement was more exploitative or symbiotic. Some claim peasants had it pretty okay for the time. Others point out the endless hunger, legal limitations, and the charming reality that your lord could, at any point, conscript you into his army or marry off your daughter. Speaking of daughters, one runs by now, barefoot, hauling a basket twice her size, chasing after a goose that's screaming like it owes money. No one laughs. No one helps. You're all too busy trying not to fall behind. You switch hands. Your palm is blistered. You should have worn gloves, except you don't have gloves. You wipe the blood on your tunic. Doesn't matter. It'll blend in with the mud and pig fat already embedded in the weave. Every now and then, a crow caws overhead. You glance up. It's your only moment of escape. That bird can fly wherever it wants. You've got another 8 hours of this, and then animal chores, and maybe a few moments by the fire before collapsing into that itchy pile of straw you dare to call bed. But there's rhythm in the work, a hypnotic pace. Your arms move on their own now. Your back has stopped complaining. It's just humming with dull pain. Your mind drifts. You think of winter. You think of storms. You think of death and how quiet it might be. Then someone cries out. A boy nearby has sliced his hand on a blade. No gloves. No bandages. Just mud and pressure and hope. You keep working because the field doesn't care. The work doesn't stop, and neither can you. You're thirsty. Not just need to sip thirsty. Your mouth feels like someone packed it with hay and then vacuum sealed it. But there's no faucet. No filtered water bottle. No lemon wedge to swirl around for aesthetics. You need a drink. And that means confronting one of medieval life's most persistent terrors. The water. Let's be clear. The water can kill you. You walk toward the village well with your empty bucket. It's heavy even when it's empty, and the handle pinches your fingers. You pass a few women scrubbing clothes in a wash tub nearby, slapping linens into already murky water. A child splashes in it. A dog drinks from it. You wince. That's not even the worst option around. The well is, theoretically, safer. Deep and lined with stone, it draws from a groundwater source. But safe in medieval times is a relative term. If it's too close to the latrine pits or a graveyard, which, surprise, it often is, bacteria will creep in and turn every sip into Russian roulette. You lower the bucket into the dark. It hits the surface with a dull splash. You haul it up, arms shaking. The water slushes over your shoes. It looks mostly clear, but there's something wiggling near the bottom. Could be a leaf. Could be a worm. You drink anyway. Slowly. Just enough to take the edge off your thirst. You tell yourself it tastes fine. It doesn't. Mainstream historians tell us that medieval Europeans were well aware water could be dangerous. That's why so many drank ale or wine instead, even at breakfast. Not because they were all party animals, but because fermentation killed off some of the nastier microbes. Small ale had low alcohol content and was brewed at home, often by women. It was the medieval version of boiling water, just more foamy. Fringe fact: in parts of the Middle East, travelers in the medieval period sometimes carried cloth filters for water. They tie a linen square over their cup before pouring to strain out bugs and grit. Some scholars speculate a few European merchants may have copied the practice, but it never caught on widely. You, unfortunately, do not have a linen filter. You have your teeth. Good luck. You dip a cloth in the water and wipe your face. Immediately, a rash begins to itch across your cheek. Coincidence? Maybe. But your skin is already raw from sun, sweat, and yesterday's mystery stew. The water just adds another variable to your slow, biological unraveling. A neighbor's child coughs nearby. That raspy, wet kind of cough. You glance at the well, then at her pale face. She's got the look. Typhoid, dysentery, cholera. Choose your poison. She might just have a cold, or she might be dead by the end of the week. That's the gamble every time someone drinks, bathes, or cooks. You take another sip. You have no choice. Your body needs it, even if your common sense is screaming no. You head back to your hut with a bucket, trying not to slosh too much. Wet feet mean blisters, and you've already got 3. You set it by the hearth. It'll be used for cooking, rinsing, and probably a dozen other things before sunset. Everyone drinks from it. Everyone shares. There's no yours and mine. It's just hope this doesn't kill us. You wonder briefly if rainwater would be cleaner. Sometimes you collect it in barrels, but if you forget to cover them, they fill with bird droppings and drowned insects. Plus, barrels crack in the cold, and if you're low on funds, you're mending leaks with mud and cloth. Not ideal for hydration. Bathing? Not with this water. If you're lucky, you get a weekly soak in water reused by your entire family. You go last. It's not warm. It's not clean. It's barely wet by the time you climb in. But hey, it counts. Your skin disagrees. Historians still argue whether medieval people bathed more or less than we think. Some records suggest public bathhouses were common in towns, at least before the Black Death sent people running from anything that resembled shared air. Others argue that peasants simply wiped down with cloth and sweated out. Either way, you're not exactly stepping into a lavender-scented bubble bath. And remember those fancy castles. Don't get jealous. Nobles sometimes had pipes to bring in water from a stream, but those pipes will lead. So sure, the water might be cooler, but also quietly killing them in a different way. You go to take another sip, but stop. Something about the taste has changed. You look down. A fly is bobbing gently on the surface. You sigh, scoop it out, and drink anyway. Welcome to hydration in the Middle Ages, an exercise in hope, desperation, and stomach cramps. And now, with your thirst technically quenched, it's time to deal with the next threat to your continued existence: medical treatment. Or, more accurately, the medieval version of a coin toss with a scalpel. Your stomach twists again. Maybe it was the water. Maybe it's the lingering rot in your tooth. Or maybe it's just stress from the never-ending parade of misfortunes that medieval life throws your way like it's auditioning for a tragedy festival. Either way, something's wrong inside you, and it's time to find help. You head toward the healer's hut, hoping she's in. You pass a pig chewing something that may or may not be human. You try not to look too closely. Priorities. The healer is a woman in her 60s, ancient by local standards, respected but also a little feared. People say she knows how to cure fever, ease childbirth, and speak to bees. They also say she once shriveled a man's finger just by glaring at it. Either way, she's your best shot. You step inside. It smells like dried herbs, sweat, and something vaguely metallic. There are bundles of sage, wormwood, and rosemary hanging from the rafters. A few bones, a dead bird, a bucket of something that bubbles unnaturally. She greets you with a look that says, "This better be good." You tell her your symptoms. She nods sagely and starts mixing a paste of mashed garlic, honey, and ground beetle. She calls it drawing salve. You ask what it draws. She doesn't answer. Mainstream historical records show that medieval medicine was a messy cocktail of folk remedies, religious rituals, and a firm belief in the four humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Your body was thought to be governed by the balance of these fluids. An illness meant one had gone rogue. You? Probably too much black bile. Or not enough prayer. The healer ties a warm poultice to your stomach, then hands you a drink made of boiled dandelions and ale. For the humus, she says. You sip. It tastes like sadness and feet, but you don't vomit. That's a win. You lie back as she lights a candle and starts whispering something over your abdomen. You're not sure if it's Latin, curses, or her grocery list. Either way, it's strangely comforting. Here's a quirky fringe tidbit. In some regions, people believe tying a dead mole around your neck would cure a cough. Why a mole? Why the neck? Historians still argue whether this practice had symbolic significance or was just medieval desperation with a hint of superstition. Of course, if the healer's potions don't work, and honestly, they often don't, you might be referred to the barber surgeon. Yes, the same guy who cuts hair, extracts teeth, and occasionally amputates limbs. He wears a blood-stained apron, keeps his tools in a leather roll, and smells like iron and regret. If your stomach pain gets worse, he'll suggest bleeding. A lot of bleeding. You lie on a plank, arm tied, and he slices open a vein with the delicacy of a man peeling fruit in a thunderstorm. The blood pools in a shallow bowl, warm, dark, and way too much of it. You feel dizzy. He smiles. That's good. The bad humors are leaving. Or, your life force. Sometimes they apply leeches. That's right. Slimy, wriggling little creatures stuck to your skin, sucking away your ailments. In theory. In practice, you now have leeches. Also, a rash. Possibly from the mole necklace you agreed to wear just in case. Historians still argue whether leeching ever had any measurable benefit or was just the medieval version of doing something because doing nothing felt wise. Either way, it was common and uncomfortable. Let's say you've got something serious, like a tumor or festering wound. Surgery is an option performed without anesthesia, without antibiotics, and often without a solid plan. Just a very sharp knife and someone to hold your legs down. Sterilization? What's that? You once saw a man get part of his leg removed after gangrene set in. He screamed. A lot. Then he passed out. Then he died a week later because no one could keep the wound clean. That's the usual outcome. You wake the next morning, somehow still alive. Your stomach pain is different, less sharp. Maybe it's healing. Or maybe the wormwood just knocked you into a weird state where pain feels like progress. You thank the healer by leaving a small offering, a chunk of bread, a chicken feather, and a coin so thin it's more wish than currency. She grunts. Come back if it turns green. Helpful. And as you walk back home, clutching your aching belly and wondering what exactly that beetle paste was doing inside you, your nose catches a new horror drifting from your hut. Something's burning, but not in a good way. You step inside to discover your next challenge, lunch. You step inside the hut, and it hits you like a wall, thick, meaty air tinged with sour milk and despair. The pot over the fire is bubbling again, but this time it's not porridge. It's something darker, more mysterious. The kind of smell that makes you question whether food is the right word. Welcome to lunch, or dinner, or supper. Time kind of blurs here. What matters is there's something hot in the pot, and you've been moving rocks all morning, so your standards are now subterranean. You peek inside. Bits of grayish meat float in a greasy broth. Could be rabbit, could be squirrel, could be rat. You don't ask. Someone tried to disguise it with turnip greens and a few shriveled onions, but it still smells like regret. You dip your spoon in and take a bite. Chewy, stringy, possibly fermented. Mainstream historians confirm that medieval meals, especially among peasants, were repetitive, bland, and heavily reliant on what was available. Usually root vegetables, legumes, and scraps of preserved meats. Refrigeration didn't exist, so fresh was a luxury, and edible was a sliding scale. Today's protein is courtesy of a snare trap behind a barn. Caught something furry? That's lunch. Missed? It's boiled cabbage and dry barley again, maybe with a sprinkle of wild garlic. If you're lucky, bread is on the table, if you can call it that. The loaf is hard as masonry and covered in a light fuzz. You knock it on the bench. It echoes. You scrape the mold off and dip it in the broth. It softens just enough to chew without losing a tooth. Small blessings. There's cheese, too. A small lump, yellowish and sweating. It has a smell, not a pleasant one. Medieval cheese was homemade, heavily salted, and aged in cellars next to pickles, onions, and the occasional rat family. You nibble the corner. It fights back. Still, it's calories. Fun fringe tidbit. In some regions, maggoty cheese was considered a delicacy. Yes, on purpose. Known as kasu marzu, though it emerged more post-medieval. The wriggling larvae were part of the experience. Historians still argue whether this was innovation, necessity, or a dare gone too far. You push the cheese aside. Someone pours you a mug of ale. Again, it's warm, flat, probably safer than water, but also tastes like someone strained it through a damp tunic. You drink it anyway because hydration is non-negotiable, and it dulls the taste of whatever meat you just ate. You chew slowly, watching the others. No one talks much during meals. You just eat. Quickly. Efficiently. Food isn't joy here. It's fuel. Maybe there's some laughter when the baby flings turnip mash at the dog, or when Grandpa farts loud enough to rattle the bowl shelf. But otherwise, it's heads down, spoons up. Someone cracks a joke about finding a toe in the stew. You laugh, but you also glance down just in case. You think about the rumors, how the Lord's table has beef, pastries, roasted game birds stuffed with herbs, how the bread is white, soft, and made with actual wheat instead of rye and dust. You've never seen it, but it haunts you like a fairy tale. Rich food for rich people. You, on the other hand, get rot survival mode. Let's talk seasoning. You wish there was any. Salt is valuable, sometimes literally used as currency. Pepper? Exotic and rare. Spices like cinnamon or cloves. Dream on. You might get a sprig of thyme or rosemary, but most of the time, you rely on your taste buds being numb enough not to notice. Historians note that in coastal towns, salted fish like herring was a staple. But inland, you need to rely on dried meats or fermented anything. Pickled beets, dried beans, sour cabbage. Medieval refrigeration was just bury it and hope. And let's not forget the bugs. In the bread, in the flour, in the dried meat hanging by the hearth. You try to ignore the tiny black specks you occasionally bite down on. Added protein, right? After the meal, cleanup is swift. The pot stays over the fire. Why wash it if you're just going to refill it later? You wipe your spoon on your tunic and tuck it into your belt. One bowl, one spoon, one communal eating experience. Leftovers go into the pot. The same pot where breakfast lived. And yesterday's dinner. And, honestly, a week's worth of slowly congealing ambition. It's fine. It's all boiling. You tell yourself that kills everything. Probably. You step outside for air. The sky has darkened slightly. Afternoon shadows stretch across the ground. You burp. It tastes like pickled meat and something vaguely floral. You pray it was part of the broth and not the beginning of another digestive rebellion. But you don't have time to ponder. There's still work to be done, pigs to wrangle, and someone said a neighbor just got excommunicated for baking bread on a saint's day, which means religion's about to enter the picture, and you're expected to care deeply about things you barely understand, or else. The bell tolls from the church tower, slow, echoing, and completely unavoidable. Whether you're in the field, the privy, or halfway through your wormy cheese, that sound slices through your life like a divine deadline. It's time to pay attention to God, or else. You wipe your hands on your tunic, mutter a half-hearted prayer, and start toward the chapel. No matter how tired you are, no matter how hungry or muddy or blistered, you show up. Not because you're especially pious, but because not showing up could mean serious trouble. In the medieval world, religion isn't just a Sunday obligation. It's a full-time lifestyle. Your week is organized by feast days, saint days, fasting days, confession days, and days where even thinking about not being at Mass gets you suspicious look from the village elder with the eyebrow mole and deep spiritual paranoia. The chapel is small, stone, mossy, cold even in summer. Inside, the air is thick with incense and candle smoke. You kneel on a wooden plank, splinters threatening salvation from below. The priest begins in Latin. You don't understand Latin. No one around you does either, except maybe the priest, and even he might be faking it. Mainstream historians agree that Latin remained the dominant language of worship for most of the medieval period, which meant that for centuries, people sat through services they couldn't comprehend. The ritual mattered more than the meaning. You cross yourself. You mumble the responses. You pretend to understand when the priest rails against sin, blasphemy, or the devil hiding in your cow. And that's just the surface. The church isn't just preaching, it's ruling. It owns land. It collects tithes. It controls marriage, inheritance, education, holidays, and your eternal fate. You're not just a villager. You're a soul on loan. A tenth of what you earn goes straight to the church. It's called a tithe. You pay in coin, grain, eggs, or even labor. If you don't pay, you get publicly shamed or excommunicated, which in this society is basically social death. No one talks to you. No one trades with you. And when you die, you don't get buried on holy ground. just a lonely patch of dirt that the pigs avoid. Oh, and if you really mess up, you could be accused of heresy. That's not just a slap on the wrist. That's inquisitors questioning confession under duress and possibly a date with the village pyre. You glance at the statues along the chapel wall. Mary stares down with sad eyes. The crucifix above the altar is deeply unsettling. Blood, wounds, suffering. You're supposed to be inspired, but mostly you feel vaguely guilty. For what? Not sure. Just everything. Religion is baked into every moment of your day. Wake up, pray, eat, thank God, stub your toe, offer it up to purgatory reduction. Want to get married? The church decides. Want to confess you accidentally coveted someone's goat? Step into the booth and whisper. Fringe fact. In some regions, confession was public before it became private. Yes, people would line up in front of the priest and admit out loud that they swore, stole bread, or scandalously danced during Lent. Historians still argue whether public confession strengthened community or just created a thriving rumor mill. And speaking of rumors, did you hear about the widow who keeps a candle burning on Thursdays? Word is she talks to spirits. She might just be remembering her dead husband, or she might be next on the Inquisitor's list. Depends who's in charge that week. Women especially feel the grip of religious control. They're told their bodies are sinful, their thoughts suspect, and their main virtue lies in obedience. If you're a woman who can't have children, clearly God is punishing you. If you have too many children, that's also suspicious. Fun game. The priest ends the service with a flourish. You bow your head. You feel no different, but you've ticked the spiritual attendance box. Outside, the crowd murmurs about sin, gossip, and who's getting married next week. The bride is 13. The groom is 30. Everyone shrugs. God wills it. You head back home, your stomach still uneasy. You pass a cross carved into a tree, a shrine with a weathered saint's face, and 3 old women murmuring prayers while grinding herbs. You cross yourself again just in case. It never hurts, but sometimes it does. Like when the church decides that music, dancing, or working on certain days offends the heavens. Or when someone suggests bathing too often is vanity. Or when famine strikes and the priest says it's due to your wickedness, not bad weather. You sit by your hearth that night, staring into the fire, listening to it crackle under the weight of damp, kindling, and guilt. You wonder what it's like to live without a shadow of sin looming over your every move. Probably illegal, but don't worry. Tomorrow's a holy feast day, which means special prayers, extra chores, and if you're lucky, a fish head in your stew. You drift to sleep wondering how many Ave Marias it takes to make up for swearing under your breath during church. You wake to the sound of chickens squawking, a baby crying, and someone shouting about lost goats. So, business as usual. But today, instead of grabbing your hoe and heading to the fields, you stop to help your sister tie a linen cloth over her head. She's 14 and already married. This morning, she's leaking milk from one breast and bruised from yesterday's birth on the other side. You help her to the stool. She winces. You don't ask, because in the Middle Ages, being a woman is playing life on hard mode. There's no pause, no help menu, and no bonus round. Just a daily test of pain, patience, and patriarchy. Your sister is one of the lucky ones. She survived childbirth. Many don't. Pregnancy is a dice roll with the odds heavily against you. There's no prenatal care, no C-sections, unless you count the kind performed after the mother dies, and certainly no epidurals. Just grit your teeth, push through the agony, and pray to Saint Margaret, patron saint of childbirth, for mercy. Mainstream historical sources confirm that maternal mortality rates were staggeringly high. Between infections, hemorrhaging, and obstructed labor, childbirth was one of the top causes of death for women. And they gave birth often. An average peasant woman might have a child every 1 to 2 years until her body gave out, or she did. The midwife down the lane? She's helpful when available. But if she's already tending to another birth or recovering from her own fever, you get your neighbor and a prayer. There's no sterile equipment, no antiseptic, just boiling water, rags, and crossed fingers. And even outside of childbirth, a woman's life is a long, aching endurance test. Marry young, often arranged by parents. Your worth is measured by your fertility, your obedience, and your ability to keep a household running while also tending animals, preserving food, weaving, washing, cooking, child rearing, and surviving. Fringe tidbit. In some parts of medieval Europe, laws allowed husbands to legally beat their wives within reason. What counted as reason was horrifyingly vague. Some towns even had wife stools, not for comfort, but as punishment perches in public squares where disobedient women were displayed and shamed. You look around your village. Every woman is multitasking like her life depends on it, because it does. Boiling laundry in a cauldron over open flames, gutting fish while balancing a baby on one hip, patching a tunic while checking a stew. There's no me time, no hobbies, no yoga classes. Your identity is work, your value is service, and your legacy is survival. Historians still argue whether women had more freedom in early medieval rural villages compared to later periods, especially during times of labor shortages. Some suggest peasant women had more autonomy when their husbands were away or dead, while others emphasize how legal rights were almost entirely stripped in most cases. You go outside and see a widow walking to church, her head covered, her eyes down. She can't inherit land. She can't remarry without permission. She can't refuse church tithes. But she can be accused of witchcraft if she knows too much about healing herbs or helps deliver one too many healthy babies. You help your cousin carry water from the stream. She's barely 10, but already knows how to milk goats, season stew with thyme and lard, and spot signs of pregnancy in chickens. There's no childhood, just a brief, blurry transition from small child to small adult. Even clothing plays its part in the grind. Heavy wool skirts drag through mud and filth. Long sleeves catch fire, catch lice, catch everything. Head coverings are mandatory in many places, part modesty, part social expectation. Uncovered hair, suspicious, or scandalous. Let's not forget menstruation. There are no pads, no tampons, no Midol. You use rags if you have them. You wash them in the river. You hope no one notices the stains on your smock. And if you faint from cramps, too bad. There's a cow in labor, and you're the one who knows where the clean hay is. You return home to find your sister nursing the baby while kneading dough with her elbow. She hums softly. The baby coos. For a moment, it feels almost peaceful. But then the baby cries, and your sister winces. Her milk is drying up. The healer says she needs more food, more rest. But there's none of either. Even noble women have their struggles. Sure, they might have silk gowns and cushioned chairs, but they're still locked in marriages arranged for power, expected to produce sons and run households like miniature states. And they're just as vulnerable to dying in childbirth. No amount of embroidery changes that. You hear the bell toll again. Evening service. Another long hour of kneeling, praying, and being told your worth lies in purity, patience, and pain. You sigh, adjust your sister's shawl, and go to gather eggs before the fox does. You step around the pigsty, grab a basket, and brace yourself for the next day of fetching, birthing, boiling, and bleeding in silence. Because in this world, being a woman isn't just survival. It's warfare, waged with wool, water buckets, and a will of iron. You hear shouting, not the playful kind, the sharp, guttural kind that carries across a village and sends children ducking behind barrels. Two men are standing in the lane, chest to chest, red-faced and fists clenched. Over what? A pig, a property line, or maybe just bad ale? Doesn't matter. What matters is that fists are about to fly, and no one's going to stop them. Violence in medieval life isn't a rare event. It's part of the daily soundtrack. There's no police force, no emergency number, no just talk it out mindset. Someone takes your grain, you settle it yourself, or with your cousins and a pointy stick. The two men are circling now. One swings, misses. The other connects with a loud crack. Blood sprays from a nose. Everyone nearby barely looks up. A few grunts. One woman mutters, "Not again." The baker's boy places a casual bet with a wink. This is Tuesday. Mainstream historians agree that medieval society was steeped in violence. Not just war and battle, but routine, normalized acts in everyday life. Fights, beatings, thefts, and public punishment were part of the rhythm, especially where legal systems were loose or corrupt. You glance toward the town center. The stocks are occupied again. A man sits slumped, wrists and ankles locked in wooden boards. Someone threw a turnip at him earlier. It stuck. He's been there for hours, a punishment for stealing bread. Or maybe insulting the reeve. The lines blur. Next to the stocks is the whipping post. Bloodstained, splintered, recently used. Children play beside it like it's a tree. It's just another fixture of the landscape. And then there's the gallows. High on the hill. No one talks about it, but everyone sees it. A reminder. Step out of line, and that rope will be your last necklace. You walk past a drunk sprawled in the mud. His nose is crooked. His tunic is soaked. He tried to fight a tax collector last week. Didn't go well. He'll wake up sore and probably do it again tomorrow. Fun fringe fact. In some towns, pigs that cause damage, like trampling crops or knocking over children, were tried in actual courts. With lawyers. Some were sentenced to death. Historians still argue whether this was symbolic justice or a weird side effect of legal overreach. Either way, imagine explaining to your friends that your cousin is representing a particularly unruly goat in court. But back to the humans. Domestic violence? Commonplace. A man strikes his wife in the doorway ahead. No one flinches. It's not hidden, it's expected. Social norms say a husband has the right to discipline his household, and a wife who speaks back is asking for it. Her silence isn't consent. It's survival. Violence doesn't even need a reason. A bad harvest? Blame the outsider. A child gets sick? Accuse the old woman down the road of cursing him. Superstition and desperation fuel acts that feel unthinkable in modern times. But here, they're chillingly normal. Disputes over livestock, land, inheritance, all end in screaming, shoving, or blades. And those are just the small ones. Bigger conflicts escalate fast. Families feud. Clans clash. Someone brings a cudgel to a wedding. Someone else doesn't leave. You once watched two brothers argue over a fence post and end up chasing each other with scythes. One lost a finger. The other lost his standing in church. No one apologized. Even children aren't spared. Games often turn violent. Wrestling, stick fights, rock-throwing competitions. You once saw a 10-year-old knock out his friend's tooth with a sheep bone. The adults laughed. Builds character, they said. Historians note that medieval legal systems, especially in rural areas, were more about compensation than prevention. If you injured someone, you paid a fine or offered goods in restitution. Jail was rare. Revenge was not. You pass a house where a man is sharpening a knife, not for food, but because he heard someone's been sneaking around his grain shed. He's not going to report it. He's going to wait. And then it'll be his justice. Maybe a cracked rib. Maybe worse. Outside the tavern, someone stumbles out, bloody and grinning. Lost again, he says, lifting a mug in mock salute. His eye is swelling. A tooth is missing. Everyone laughs. And then, just like that, the fight in the lane ends. One man limps off. The other spits blood and walks back to his cart. No trial. No jail. Just bruises, maybe a broken rib, and a story for next market day. You return to your hut as the sun lowers. The chickens are restless. A fox came too close last night, and someone's already planning a trap with more spikes than necessary. As night falls, the village quiets, but the tension remains. You sleep light. Everyone does. You keep a stick by the door and a rock under your bed. Not because you're paranoid, because you've learned the truth. In medieval times, violence isn't a danger. It's a guarantee. You wake up coughing. Again, the air inside the hut is thick with smoke from last night's fire and the lingering scent of moldy straw. Your joints ache like they've aged a decade overnight. Your back protests even before you sit up. You're not even 30, but in this world, you might as well be ancient. Because in medieval times, dying young isn't a tragedy, it's a trend. You rub your eyes and glance around the room. Your uncle is curled in a corner, snoring like a thunderstorm. He's 42, which means he's considered old. People treat him with the kind of reverence normally reserved for relics. He's outlived 3 wives, most of his teeth, and about a plague. You're pretty sure he's part ghost already. Mainstream historians estimate that average life expectancy in medieval Europe hovered around 30 to 35 years. But that number is a bit misleading. It's dragged down by incredibly high infant and child mortality rates. Make it past the age of 5, and you might live into your 40s or 50s. But that's a big, wheezy, bug-infested mite. Your neighbor's baby died last week. Fever. Probably something simple like measles or a stomach bug. But there's no cure, no rehydration salts, no pediatrician. Just crying, prayer, and the tiny coffin your cousin built from scrap wood. Child death is so common. People don't always name their babies right away. What's the point when a cough could mean a funeral by Thursday? You scratch your arm. A sore's not healing. It's red and warm and getting worse. Could be an infected bite. Could be nothing. Could be everything. You heard a traveler talk about blood poisoning. You're not sure what that means, but the man had black spots on his legs. He died before reaching the next village. You know this because you helped bury him. Shallow grave. No ceremony. Just dirt, rocks, and a whispered prayer from a priest who kept his distance. Fun fringe tidbit. In some medieval towns, bell ringers were hired specifically to announce deaths and walk ahead of the corpse in processions. They rang a handbell and shouted the name of the deceased. Unless, of course, no one knew who they were. In that case, they just rang and moved on. You've been to more funerals than you can count. Some are marked with stone crosses. Most are not. You remember the plague year. No time for funerals then. Just carts, lime pits, and mass burials. The bring out your dead scenes weren't exaggerations. You saw one man throw his still-breathing grandmother onto the cart because he couldn't risk her coughing in a house again. And if it's not disease that takes you, it's injury. A slip with an axe, a fall from a ladder, a cow kick to the chest. Infection sets in. Fever follows. Within a day or two, you're hallucinating. By day 4, you're gone. There's no health system to speak of. Just folk remedies, prayers, and guesswork. If you're lucky, you die quietly. If not, you scream for hours while your family watches, helpless and terrified. Historians still argue whether medieval people were emotionally hardened to death or just emotionally exhausted by it. Some suggest they mourned deeply but had to move on quickly for survival. Others say the constant exposure numbed them. You suspect it's both. You grieve, but efficiently. You step outside. The air smells like smoke and damp grass. 2 men pass by carrying a small wrapped bundle. Another death. Another hole in the ground. You nod respectfully. No one stops to weep. There's work to do. You remember the tales. The knight who died in battle. The noble woman who passed in childbirth. The farmer who drank spoiled milk and was dead before sundown. Everyone has a story, and every story ends the same way. Too soon. Your friend Marjorie once joked that if she reached 35, she'd consider herself immortal. She didn't make it. A fever in winter. The healer tried everything. Leeches, garlic, prayers, but nothing worked. You still think about her laugh. You feel older every day. Not because of years, but because of weight. Of loss. Of watching so many come and go while you trudge on, unsure whether that ache in your ribs is just fatigue or the beginning of the end. You sit by the fire that night, watching it burn low. The kids are asleep. The dog sighs, twitching in his dreams. The stars above shine cold and distant. You whisper a prayer, not for long life, but for a quiet death. Not on the floor, not in the mud, just somewhere with dignity, whatever that means here. You lie down, close your eyes, breathe in the dust, the straw, the fading scent of time hung over the door. You're still here, for now, but in this world, now is all you ever get. You wake to the same aching joints, the same sour taste in your mouth, the same flickering light from the hearth. Another day in medieval life, another chance to survive. But don't romanticize it. There are no fairy godmothers waiting to grant you wishes. No dragons to slay for gold. No magical destinies. Just the steady, grim grind of existence. You don't live in a storybook. You live in a place where people die from stepping on a rusty nail. You pull on your stiff tunic, still damp from last night's rain, and step outside. The world is quiet. Too quiet. A neighbor's door hangs open. No candle inside. You suspect what that means. Another death. Another small gap in the fragile web of your village. You once dreamed of adventure, of castles, banners fluttering in the wind, quests and glory. But medieval life doesn't give you glory. It gives you splinters, calluses, and a relentless sense that you're always one bad harvest or cough away from disaster. The village bard sometimes sings tales of knights and noble deeds. But you notice how those songs always skip the details. The dysentery, the lice, the constant hunger. Even the nobility can't escape the misery. They just get it in fancier clothes. Mainstream historians remind us that the medieval period wasn't all darkness. There was music, community, even moments of beauty. Sunsets over thatched roofs, children's laughter, a loaf of warm bread pulled fresh from the fire. But for the average person, the misery vastly outweighed the magic. And if you were an outsider, foreign, disabled, unusual in any way, life was even harder. Suspicion, isolation, and blame came quickly. Your survival often depended on staying invisible. Fringe tidbit. In some remote villages, people believed that changelings, fairy children swapped for human ones, were responsible for strange behavior in infants or illness. These beliefs led to tragic outcomes. Historians still argue whether the myth functioned as folklore comfort or as a tool for explaining the unexplainable in a terrifying world. Your stomach growls. You forgot to eat yesterday. Too busy hauling timber. You nibble a crust of bread so hard it might chip your last molar. You suck on it until it softens. Welcome to breakfast. You catch a glimpse of yourself in a rain puddle. Hollow cheeks. Dote smudges. Eyes older than they should be. You're 29. You feel 60. The local lord rides through the village this morning. He doesn't look at you. Why would he? You're one of many. Faceless, voiceless, functionally invisible unless you fail to pay your taxes. His horse is cleaner than your entire family. Later today, someone will get into a fight over a borrowed tool. A child will get sick. A sheep will go missing. Life continues, not with progress, but with maintenance. Always repairing, always enduring. And you start to realize this isn't just a bad year. This is the way things are. Forever. No safety nets. No guarantees. No exit strategy. If you're lucky, you'll marry, have children, and die without too much screaming. And if you're unlucky, you already know what that looks like. You curl up by the hearth that night, listening to the wind against the wood, the soft creak of the roof beams. Your skin itches. Your toothaches. Your back won't let you sleep on one side anymore. You whisper a quiet prayer, not for wealth or fame or even comfort, just for one more day, one more sunrise, one more chance to stay a little longer in this world of mud, blood, and slow, grinding days. Because fairy tales are for books. This is reality. This is the Middle Ages. But now, let your body start to loosen. You've made it through. Mud, misery, toothaches, and all. The fire's down to glowing embers. The village is quiet. No arguments. No crying. Just the faint rhythm of life settling into sleep. Take a slow breath. Let the heaviness of the medieval world melt away. The scratchy tunic, the muddy boots, the aching jaw, they all fade into soft memory now, like fog lifting off the fields in early morning light. Outside, the stars burn quietly above your tiny wooden home. You're not worrying about taxes, or the pigs, or tomorrow's work. Not now. You're warm. You're here. And that's enough. Let your muscles soften. Let the stories of lords and leeches dissolve into background hum. The crackle of a fire. The hush of straw under your back. The sigh of a dog curled near your feet. Time stretches. The night deepens. Whatever the Middle Ages threw at you, lice, plagues, bucket toilets, you made it through. Not unscathed, but still breathing, still dreaming. And now, you can rest. Let the darkness fold around you gently. Let the weight of history slide off your shoulders. And sleep. Just sleep.